Hello guys and welcome back to the UtdDistrict YouTube channel. Today I'm joined by Yusuf and Nick to talk about the loss against Tottenham Hotspur and the shaky start to the season that Manchester United have had, but also to look forward to the upcoming game against Nottingham Forest where Erik ten Hag's men will be sure to be looking to get 3 points in that game. It's been a bit of a difficult start. Of course, we got the victory against Wolves, but it was unconvincing at best. And then we were punished against Spurs, two goals in the second half. It was a decent first half performance maybe, but the second half let United down. And that's almost been the story of Erik ten Hag's side since he took over at Old Trafford, especially against these big teams away from home. First of all, Yusuf, I'll come to you. I mean, what would you say went wrong for United in that Spurs game? Because it was looking good at the start. I feel like there were some good moments, especially early on in the game.
Yeah, so obviously off camera, me and you were talking, and I said, I think the turning point came in the 38th minute where Anthony, pretty needlessly, gave away a silly foul, got a yellow card, and then the ref also carded Bruno, who was approaching the ref. And that is quite silly, really, that he carded Bruno, because Bruno, as captain, obviously has that right that he can approach the ref. But it started just from a very needless foul from Anthony. Obviously, then we got the double yellow card. I think we lost our heads a bit. Spurs got control. So, for example, before that moment, we had 14 shots to their 3. 13 shots of our 14 had come in the box. So we had the chances. We were clearly dominating. But then towards the end of the half, we didn't have a single shot. They had 3. And then, obviously, that had that Sarr cross that hit the woodwork, which literally came right after Porro hit the bar. So they took control because we lost our heads, and then we just never really regained control, I think. And this has been a problem away from home. We struggle in those kind of hostile environments. We struggle to control our emotions.
Yeah, definitely. And moving on from kind of one of the points you did make is the United were creating chances. And this is something I almost wanted to highlight is, of course, there's one stat which has been going about on Twitter, which is that Manchester United have made of course, it's only a 2-game kind of, we're only 2 games in, so you take it with a pinch of salt, but United have made the third most big chances in the league so far, but only scoring 1 goal. That's just kind of a little indicator about those missed chances, and that was probably one of the things that allowed Spurs to take control of that second half. Because if United put away 1 or 2 of those chances, then they'd be a lot more confident and perhaps be in the driving seat for that game. But it didn't happen. But I wanted to speak about more specifically is about the high press, which United have done, and it's actually been somewhat successful in these opening games. It's just about the end product. We've actually won the ball the most times per game out of any team, of course, 2 games in. So again, pinch of salt. But that's 12 final third possessions won per game in those 2 opening games. So we're getting the ball high up. And I think that is something to do with Mason Mount coming into the team. And we'll obviously talk about his injury later in the episode. But it's a promising kind of development with United, and we saw it throughout periods last season, but we've started in that particular aspect well. But the problem is putting those chances away. We saw multiple times where Anthony would win the ball in an advanced area, and you'd look and you'd go, there's a space there to attack, there's a player there to pass. And you praise him for winning the ball in a really advanced area, a really dangerous area, but then he loses the ball. And I think there was one particular instance where he regained possession, tried to play a pass and lost it, but the possession came back to him, and then he tried to play another pass and lost it. And it was a really frustrating moment because there was 2 solid openings for United there, and it's not just Anthony, other players have done it as well, but I think the Spurs game was a good example of United just not taking advantage of what they're doing well in that pressing aspect. But moving on to you, Nick. Of course, I know you wanted to speak about kind of some similarities to perhaps last season's start. So go on.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting in that the first 2 games this season have been poor, just like they were last season. If you remember, obviously 2-1 against Brighton at home, and then the 4-0 against Brentford, which we conceded all 4 in the first half. Now, on the face of it, you'd look at it and say, well, okay, so Ronaldo's gone, De Gea's gone, Maguire's not starting. Three players who we know Ten Hag obviously doesn't and didn't want in his starting 11. Now you look at the team, and well, most of it are players who he assigned himself or he's given contract extensions to. So it is now a Ten Hag team. So why is it not working? Why has there been a poor start? And on that, I would also like to add that if in that first half things had gone a bit differently, we would be sitting here having a different conversation because we did create the chances. But going back to what the problem could be is that in both instances, last season and this season, we have been trying to implement a new style, a new system of play. Now, last season, it was predominantly trying to work it out the back. And so it was like Eriksen dropping in between the two centre backs, trying to pick up the ball and play those balls, so get them out wide and then try work it forward. And that didn't work. And obviously, we famously conceded that goal against Brentford where the pass to him from De Gea was a bit weak, and then he gave the ball away and we conceded. And yeah, now this season is different. It's the aggressive press, trying to get really into the opponent's faces, and then obviously it's a little bit different working out the back, etc. So that's what's changed in that there's a new style. And last season, when it came to the Liverpool game, he scrapped what he was trying to do. He said, right, De Gea, every time you get the ball, don't try to work it out the back, just go long. And it worked. We won 2-1. And then from then onwards, it was sort of compromise. It wasn't always go long, but it wasn't always try to work it out the back either. There had to be some sort of a middle ground because we needed to get points on the board, and he managed to do it with that compromise. Now, I do wonder if this season or just in these next few weeks, perhaps, he's got to do the same thing. Because I look at some of the things in those first two games, and while sometimes it did work and we did win the ball high up the pitch and created those chances, when it doesn't work, it's bad and we get pulled apart. And Casemiro is having to cover a load of space, which I believe not even some of the best CDMs in the world could do. Never mind someone who is 31, he never quite had, he was never the most energetic and get about CDM out there anyway. So I think that the role of Casemiro in there is very important, but can he do it? Can anyone cover that amount of space and try to deal with that amount of midfielders around him? I'm not so sure. So listen, Ten Hag will know better than me, clearly. And I think when Højlund is back and Rashford can get back out on the left, maybe things will be a bit different. But I do feel like there will have to be compromise, especially when you're looking at Arsenal against Brighton as well. If we play in the same way we did against Wolves against them, we're going to get pulled apart. So, yeah, I do wonder if we are going to see some changes in how we try to play going forward.
Yeah, it definitely is a good point to bring up. I mean, those two starts of the season, there are similarities, there are differences, but yeah, good point overall. So we'll move on to the upcoming game and look forward and hopefully look for positives, but obviously we'll also be talking about some of the things that have happened this week. And first of all, obviously Forest coming up on Saturday, but news came out on Tuesday afternoon that Mason Mount would be unavailable for the game and most likely unavailable up until after the international break. There's been conflicting opinions about Mason Mount. Some have said that he's had good moments in these games, and I did see arguments that he was probably one of United's better players in the first half against Spurs, where it was probably our best half of football so far, which is a low bar, but still. So, Nick, Mason Mount out of the game. What are your thoughts, and who do you think should replace him?
Against Forest, a team where you would expect us to have majority possession, although I would have said the same thing against Wolves, and that wasn't necessarily the case, so who knows. But nonetheless, against Forest, especially because you may expect them at times to sit deep and try to put up a low block, I personally would play Eriksen. But going forward against Arsenal, for example, I'm not so sure that he's someone you want to have coming up against Arsenal. So maybe in that game you put in McTominay, or maybe you move Bruno Fernandes out to the right. I know a lot of people don't like that. I'm not the biggest fan either, but maybe you move Bruno Fernandes out to the right and then still play Eriksen, and that kind of gives us a bit more security. But yeah, I think I would personally, I'll go Eriksen against Forest, and then maybe a McTominay against Arsenal. It shows our lack of depth. But yeah, I think those are the two I'd go for.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's quite funny, really, because I'm not saying that United shouldn't have sold Fred, but if he was still here, but there would be quite a lot of arguments for him to probably start in the 2 games.
Yeah.
It was a funny thought, but yeah, he scored on his debut as well in Turkey. But yeah, good luck to him. But yeah, Yusuf, I mean, Mason Mount's had a difficult start. This probably won't make it much easier because he's out of the team and he's gonna. I was thinking before the game that Forest was a good game for him, that he could potentially pick up some confidence in that game, and obviously he's not going to be playing. Could you let us know your preferred player to play against Forest, and also, do you think that the kind of obviously Nick was speaking about the high press that has seemed to be installed. Do you think that will be changed a little bit because of the different personnel that would come in place of him?
Yeah, so firstly, I'll talk about Arsenal. I completely agree. McTominay has got to play because obviously in the big games we tend to go with a very man-to-man pressing system. But Arsenal, especially now in this team where they've added Declan Rice, Kai Havertz, that midfield, I don't think we can survive with Eriksen in midfield against them. It's just way too physical, way too intense. We will get walked over. So I think for that game, McTominay absolutely has to be in the team. But in terms of Forest, so I was kind of in 2 minds last night. I was thinking, right, we need a bit more control. It's a team, like Nick said, yeah, on paper, we're likely to dominate the ball. You'd think Eriksen would come in, but Forest do have some very physical players in that midfield as well. They're a very strong team. And our fitness is already quite poor, so you wonder, would McTominay be better? But I'm actually going to go a bit left field and say it might be a bit of a risk. I would start one of Hannibal Mejbri or Dan Gore in midfield against Forest because I feel like it's an opposition where you can afford to take that risk, and they just bring more of a balance between that kind of physical fitness, the intensity you get with McTominay, and the kind of technical quality, the control Eriksen brings us. So I feel like Forest would be a good game. Look, McTominay is clearly not a big part of Erik ten Hag's plans going forward. Eriksen, he was only ever going to be a short-term thing, and with the squad already suffering for fitness, bringing in Eriksen is not necessarily going to help that massively. But Hannibal Mejbri, Dan Gore, 2 really talented players, 2 players who I think have futures here, and I think that giving one of them the opportunity against Forest would be a really good thing for Ten Hag to do, to really get them accustomed to playing at this level. It'd be good for their development. But also I think that kind of profile, the balance they bring us is best for the team. And we saw in pre-season how Mejbri can play that high pressing role really well actually against Leeds. He was winning the ball high up. So to move on to your next question about the press, I think Mejbri would be the best option for that because he then brings that player who can still press quite high in that 4-3-3 shape with Bruno, but then also run back, drop deeper, help out Casemiro. He's comfortable picking the ball up a bit deeper. A lot of people remember him as a very hot-headed player, but I think his loan at Birmingham matured him quite a lot, and we saw more maturity from him in pre-season, controlling his emotions a bit better. I think it would be a really good opportunity to play him. But yeah, I think it depends who we play. I can still see us pressing high against Forest. I think Ten Hag won't compromise too much on that. Even with Mount gone, he'll want someone pressing high. Maybe they won't be as good as Mount, but that's where I think Mejbri maybe can fill that role. So that's what I'd go for against Forest.
That's a really interesting shout. And those it's an interesting point because those 2 youth players, Mejbri and Dan Gore, they probably are the 2 main players, obviously apart from Kobe Mainoo, which you'd say are technically almost there and physically almost there. They're kind of like Dan Gore, even though he's quite small, he's a really nippy player and he's really strong in the tackle. And of course, Hannibal's the same. So that would be a really interesting. I'd love to see either of them come in. I've been really impressed with Dan Gore over pre-season, and I didn't watch the game, but the under-21s won against Stockport last night, and apparently he was one of the best players on the pitch from several people I've seen on Twitter. So. Yeah, that would be an interesting point. But moving on from the midfield, because I think, of course, Mount being out, someone will come in for him, but we're expecting Casemiro and Bruno to both be there. the next topic of concern for United in this game is who will start in the front three, because obviously we recorded a video before the start of the season and
yeah. See, I think Pellistri deserves to start as well. I think, like I said, he's been really impressive every cameo, and I think the main difference between him and Garnacho, I do think Garnacho is better, but I think Pellistri's game is a bit more refined than Garnacho's at this moment in time. Like he makes decisions a little bit better. He's just a little more secure on the ball right now. And so I think from the start, he might handle starting a little bit better than Garnacho does. So yeah, I'd love to see Pellistri get a game on the right. I think in the centre, it really depends for me, because if Martial is fit, biggest if question of all time for Man United fans, if Martial is fit, I'm sorry, I love you, Martial, but I would start him up front. And I think the team, even like to this day, right, even like we know he's kind of sadly not going to reach the heights we wished he would have. But I would have loved to see Martial really kind of, or not, I don't know, let me start again.
Yeah, because the ringtone would have been annoying for the audio anyway.
Did the ring come up on your guys?
Yeah, that came up.
We heard it.
Yeah, give me a sec. Oh, it won't come up again, don't worry.
All right. I'll start again.
We all agreed that Anthony would start on the right, Garnacho would start on the left, and Rashford would start through the middle. Maybe Yusuf disagreed with Anthony starting, but it was almost kind of what we expected. Now, it's quite strange because all three of those players have been missing. Garnacho has almost shown that perhaps he's not ready to be a consistent starter. I mean, that might be too early to say because it's only 2 games, but you saw a few differences in his game than when he comes off the bench. So, yeah, he didn't have a good first 2 games. Rashford playing through the middle just didn't look anywhere near as good as when we've seen him from the left last season, and even through the middle at times last season. And Anthony has not been great either. So all 3 of them have disappointed, and they started both games. Nick, would you completely change it around? What would be your front 3, and what would you be thinking if you were in Ten Hag's shoes?
The thing is, I thought this after the first game about Sancho. Now, I understand that he didn't want to change the starting 11 because maybe he wanted to give them a chance to prove themselves again, or maybe just a thing to say, look, there's nothing wrong with my starting 11 here. They can perform. We just maybe got a few things wrong against Wolves. But I think based on the cameo performances against Wolves and against Tottenham, I do think Sancho should come in, not only because of his performances, but also because, as we saw in pre-season, we tried him out at the false 9 position, which I think, it can work. It can work to an extent because it allows Rashford to get back out on the left. I think Rashford through the middle has been so frustrating. He's barely gotten involved in the game. He's only had a few pop shots here and there, and his hold-up play isn't amazing. When his back to goal, it's not the level that you want it to be. So I think you bring Sancho in to get Rashford back out on the left, and then on the right, I think Ten Hag will still go with Anthony. But you know what? I would love to see Pellistri get a start. Because every time he comes on, he's so direct. He's so just willing to run at his man. And the thing is that in the positions at which Pellistri loses the ball, because it's going to happen if you run at your man, it doesn't cause us too much of an issue because it's usually out wide. It's usually high up the pitch. And if he loses it that high up and on the wing, we can recover better. But you see Anthony in scenarios where he's trying to come inside. He's losing the ball inside where their midfielders are all around, and that's causing us a lot more problems. So I would like to see Pellistri get a go, but do I think it will happen? Probably not, no.
I completely agree. I mean, there is a point with Pellistri because everyone is very excited because, like you said, every cameo performance off the bench, he has impressed. And he's looked really sharp. And it's almost like a kind of dilemma with these young players, especially the wingers, because Garnacho's the exact same. He deserved a start because he is electric whenever he comes off the bench. And this was happening last season as well. But then it's almost like a little bit different of a game for that winger. Garnacho, I mean, he's definitely impressed when starting games. He hasn't exactly... he's not gone missing in every start that he's had, but that it has happened more often when he starts than when coming off the bench, because it is a completely different game. So I would be wary for Pellistri to start, but it's like I said, it's one of those things because I'd say he deserves to start, because unless you're putting Sancho on that right side, I would give Pellistri the start as well, just because when you're coming off the bench and making impacts, you've got to at least get the chance, and then we can see whether he can do it when playing 90 minutes. But yeah, Yusuf, would you say Pellistri deserves a start, and what would you expect from him if he did, and what would you be your front three overall if you were going into this game?
Yeah, I'd love to see Pellistri get a start, and I think even though I think Garnacho's a better player, I think Pellistri might handle starting a bit better, because at this moment in time, he's just a little bit more refined in his game. So he's just slightly more secure on the ball. Decision-making is a bit more consistent. So I feel like on the right, he would be a really good option to start. I do doubt he does get the start. And like Cain said, I think there is a bit of that risk in that, his cameos off the bench good because they're off the bench. I do think he could start, but I'd like to see that. In terms of the middle, if Martial is fit, big if, sadly, if Martial is fit, I think he would be the best option to start. Even now, like years down the line, the team looks better with Martial in it than it does without Martial in it. And Martial being in the middle allows Rashford to play off that left. But him and Rashford have just got this natural telepathy with each other. They understand each other perfectly. They almost don't need to be coached in terms of how they play with each other, because one knows what the other is going to do at all times and they act according to that. So with those two, it just works, if you know what I mean. So I think if Martial's fit, if he's not fit, I'd like to see Sancho starting that false nine. Yeah. Although if Martial is fit and Pellistri doesn't start, I wouldn't mind seeing Sancho out on the right, because I do think towards the end of last season, he was really impressive there. The Chelsea games, the Fulham game, I thought he played really well in those games. In pre-season, even though he was playing in the centre, I did see him running down the right really well a few times. He's obviously looked quicker, sharper. I do think he deserves the opportunity to start on the right. So Rashford on the left, obviously, and then either of Martial or Sancho in the middle, depending on fitness, and then again, depending on fitness, Sancho or Pellistri on the right. So that's kind of the front three I'd go with. But like Nick said, I do think he will keep Antony going. And Antony has won the ball high quite a few times to his credit, but the problem is he's winning the ball and then giving it straight back away again because he's just not making the right decisions. Like I rewatched some of the games and he's just shooting from really it's the kind of position you shoot from on FIFA when you're like 3-0 up and you get really bored.
Yeah.
Like, oh, let's see, can I score from here? Can I score from here? But we're not 3-0 up, so yeah, it's just the decision making is quite poor at the minute.
Yeah. And with that front three, I would like to see Sancho played through the middle. I don't know whether it can work in Premier League football, but yeah, I feel like it would be an interesting one. And if it allows Pellistri to come in, then I'd be happy for it. But yeah, like you said, Martial, he's started 2 behind closed doors friendly games. So perhaps he is coming back towards the team. I know he came off the bench, so whether he's ready.
Did he play today as well? Was it?
Yeah, well, reportedly,
Right.
started the game. So
Yeah.
So it's it could be a start for Martial, and it would be a first start for a while. So yeah, that's an interesting one. But we'll look on the other side. We'll look at what Forest can kind of bring quite quickly. I mean, against Arsenal, I didn't watch their other game, but I watched the second half against Arsenal when they especially when ex-United player Anthony Alangana came on, they looked good on the break. And is that a worry for United? Especially, we've spoken about how they're looking a bit weaker in those defensive transitions. Is that something that Forest could target? And is that something that United need to be wary of, Nick?
I do think that is what their rough game plan will be. They will try to hit us on the counter. They will try to work with quick transitions. I actually think that Forest are going to be a lot better this season than they were last season. They're a lot more settled. They don't have 50 players coming in like they did last season and all the changes going on. I think Cooper is actually quite a good, promising manager. I think he might be one of the youngest, if not the youngest manager in the league. I'm not too sure about that. But he's a young manager, and the club clearly backed him in a time last season where it looked like they were going to be in a relegation scrap and people were talking about them going down. So they obviously back him, and he kept them up. And I think this season they're going to be very good. But yeah, as you say, they are going to be a threat on the counter attack. I think I'd be heartbroken if Alanga came on or started and produced a moment of magic, and and we're feeling somewhat away about letting him go. But yeah, I think in Gibbs White, great talent, Brennan Johnson, great talent. So yeah, I don't think this is going to be a walk in the park. It's going to be a difficult game. They're going to be physical, as Yusuf said. So yeah, I definitely think that in the same way Wolves pulled us apart in certain moments, if we leave ourselves vulnerable, they're definitely capable of doing the same.
Definitely, and Yusuf, Nick alluded to it. Is Anthony Alanga gonna have an impact in this game? I mean, he came off the bench in both games, I believe, and it could be a first start for him against his old club. What are you thinking about him coming up against United?
It would be the most Manchester United thing ever if he scored. Like generally, it would be the most Manchester United thing ever if he scored. And you know what the funny thing is, right? He's a promising player, but selling him was still the right decision in my opinion. But the revisionism, oh my god.
No, I do agree.
Yeah, he'll cause us troubles. Right now, I almost liken us to Liverpool in 2017-18 before they brought Van Dijk in the sense we're pressing high very well, but it's when the press is broken that we have issues. And I think once the fitness levels get back up a bit, that'll calm down. So once Casemiro, Lissandro, Luke Shaw, plays like that, get back up to fitness, that'll calm down. But yeah, if Elanga's playing off the left, to be fair, I could see Wan-Bissaka kind of keeping him a bit quieter if they're going direct 1v1 against each other. But obviously that depends. Will Wan-Bissaka start? Will Dalot start? I think Wan-Bissaka will start still, which is fair. He's played well. I feel like the team might be a bit more protected against transitions with Dalot's qualities in the team. But right now I'm fine with Wan-Bissaka starting. But yeah, this Forest can cause us threat in transitions. Obviously, Danilo, I think, is a really good player. He's shown a lot of promise, carrying quite powerfully through the middle. Gibbs White, we've spoken about, he's brilliant. Taiwo Awoniyi is another one. He's a real threat in the box. Like, I know everyone sees he's just an absolute tank, but generally his box movement is quite clever. So I think if Forest get in down those wide areas, he's someone we have got to watch out for. Varane will have a big job marking him. But yeah, I think we'll still go with the high press. We might be exposed a little bit in transition sometimes, but like I said off camera before we started, Ten Hag has kind of responded to these losses in a very big way every single time it's happened at United. So it wouldn't surprise me if, again, there was another big response.
Yeah, I'd like to see it. And going back to your Anthony point, Alanga point, sorry, I do want to add as well. I just think a lot of people think there can only be one winner out of like a transfer. So like if it's good for Forest, it must not be good for United. And I think it's just a good transfer for both sides. Maybe a little bit low on the fee. Maybe we could have got 20, 25. But yeah, I think he's going to be a really good signing for Forest, and hopefully not this weekend. But it was right for United to let him go. But yeah, I mean, I think that was a good kind of look at what Forest might bring, and that game will certainly be interesting, and United will need to get 3 points out of it. Otherwise, the world will end. We'll quickly, before we leave, mention about the news of Raphael Varane, which is in recent days there's been some murmurs from some different reports that a Saudi Arabia move might be a possibility. Of course, they're taking every player in Europe at the moment, so you couldn't rule it out. But Fabrizio Romano reported that it was not going to happen, and Varane came out on his Instagram and basically squashed the rumours. He posted a picture of him celebrating his goal against Wolves with a couple of emojis, which just showed that he's sticking at United. Yusuf, did you think it was a possibility, and was you worried? And
I wasn't worried, to be honest. I didn't think he'd want to leave. I didn't think Ten Hag would let him go, especially right now. I think in moments like this as a team, a player like Varane is one of the last players you let go because he's practically the most experienced player at the club. He's also the calmest head, and already, like we spoke about the Spurs game, we are a little immature sometimes. So removing Varane, he's obviously vice captain, like I said, the calmest head in the changing room. That would really make that a massive problem. But also, I don't think Varane wants to leave Manchester United. I think, like when when he came, people said, I think he's here for a payday, clearly, but I don't think he was, because it's not like you're getting paid little money at Real Madrid. But also, I saw a report around the time that Florentino Perez offered him the club captaincy as well as a bigger salary, but he genuinely wanted the challenge of playing for United. He's got a really good connection with the fans. He's spoken so many times about how much he loves everything here. Like, I don't think Varane would ever want to leave at this moment in time for Saudi Arabia. So it's a mix of, in our current moment as a team, it would be crazy to let him go. And the player himself really loves it here. I don't think he wants to go. So for me, it's not a worry, but obviously I am just really happy that he is definitely staying, and seeing him come out and actually quash the rumours is really nice.
Yeah. As well, sorry, so just to come in as well, you don't celebrate a goal like he did against Wolves and then leave a week or 2 weeks later. Like you're right, he clearly does love the club. And also, I just wanted to add as well, I absolutely love the fact that he's come out on social media and just put all these reports and links aside and said, I am going nowhere. Do you know how many times where, for example, with Paul Pogba, for example, there's been times where I think he knew he wasn't going anywhere, but there was all these reports going on, all the talks of him leaving, etc. And I just love to see a player come out and be like, I don't care what's in the news. Here's one simple picture with 3 words written in the caption and emojis, and it tells you exactly what I want, and I want to stay. I love that. I thought it was very classy.
Definitely. It was very Raphael Varane. I think he is just a classy man, a classy player. But yeah, I mean, I did see some people say, like, United, if there was a bid, that United should take it if it was high. But like, I don't think people like pay attention to the circumstances. Like, maybe you might consider something at the start of the transfer window if you've got time to bring in a really if the transfer fee's there, that you've got time to bring in a really promising, slightly younger central defender. Like maybe we could have actually got the Kim who went to Bayern, but in the last weeks of the window, and like Yusuf mentioned, he's one of our most experienced players, and he's almost shown that in the opening games with his performances. I think he's probably been one of the better players, and obviously got us the goal to get our 3 points against Wolves. But yeah, I think we can all agree that we're happy that he's staying. The reports were never too serious, but yeah, it's nice to see Varane come out and just squash everything straight away, rather than us worrying and going into the last weeks of the window. But yeah, that's all we've got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed watching, and hopefully we get the 3 points against Forest, and we can give you more reaction following that game ahead of the Arsenal and Brighton trips, which will certainly be difficult games. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video, and we will see you guys in the next one.